Oh gosh, how would I begin this, Mama? I refer quite a bit of the stuff that I've experienced that I share with others through a lot of the informatics, both the schematics and the way in which the words, coded words, which is language, which is fire letters, which is numbers, which is consciousness energy. So when we get down to the smallest molecular compaction of energy, which is consciousness, at the smallest level to the largest level, and I've covered that before. Okay? So in the Voyager materials, they make a reference to a word they use called Manu. I'm a Manu. Okay? That means that gender really dissolves when you realize that the magnetic and the electric become one. That's a crystal seed. That's an atom seed, the first crystal atom seed. I'm the first crystal atom seed. Okay? And as a result of that, it means that the perception that we have of the environment in which we operate in, particularly in a fallen system, and you get into record-keeping exercises, right, on what's being held in memory, that I measure on what we call a resistance scale. Now, a number of ways that I share this because of how hypersensitive I am to the receiver, which would be you're going to receive my communication, and then what your reaction state is going to be based on what activates a code held in your memory. Okay. And so I'm very aware of the Metatronic spiral, which is a death spiral, which is artificial light, which is artificial life, does not experience a Manu. The way that a Manu experiences being a one, which is eternal, unconditional love. And so the way that I sort of describe this in a little different ways, if you have yourself ever experienced what's known as a full phosphorus ignition, okay? If you have experienced a full phosphorus ignition, then it's like returning. That's a complete reset, recalibration back to the source from which it all began. Okay, that's a reset. That's a full reset. That's cosmic level spirit. Okay. So another way that I describe this, particularly when we get into the spiritual torture side of things, okay, particularly when we get into reproduction, the hormones, the chemical neuron messengers, right, that relate to replication or reproduction of another one of you, or if you will, an identical software operating system, right, or how visual mathematical codes are related to the software that is being run by a soul, right? Take it for a spin. Now you get into the actual spin rotation between the difference in the currents between a Metatronic spiral, right, and the original spiral, okay? So one of the things that the Voyager material brought out in one of the videos I watched the other day talked about being willing to incarnate in here and take on the Metatronic code, which is the black goo. Other words that could be used for it would be victimizer software, or what I sometimes, when I put it up there, I'll put up a black heart. Okay? And so this is where some of the Voyager materials was covering how to become one is where there is no separation between the male and the female and the female and the male. Okay? Which is known as the perfect vibrational harmony, which means both the male and the female are experiencing each other being one, which means being together, they're experiencing eternal unconditional love through both their hearts. And I've described this before, like when you're in the presence of a female, like I'm in a male avatar, okay? But I'm androgynous. That's perfect balance between male and female. So that means that's like the center point from which it all began. There's only what love is. okay, that's on fire. To do what? Spread love everywhere that we go. Wherever we're experiencing something is less than what that is. So if you want to think of this through a sexual reproduction way of codes, code activations, right? And sort of how I cut through the resistance that others have by how I experience this. And particularly when you think about it on a motherboard. And that is like, for instance, when I was having my first sexual encounter that I had when I was a teenager, okay? It's not like when you're in the privacy of a room that is not being experienced by the one, okay? Which means the one is experiencing what you're experiencing, which means the orgasm, if you will, and the insemination that takes place in which a flash of light becomes a point of conception in which the soul and the spirit now come into that realm. I can experience that. Remember when I did the video about hypersensitivity? Which means I can experience you being made love to. I can experience the love that you're making in spiritual form of that energy, because you represent another aspect of what it is that I am in energy. I'm experiencing what you're experiencing. Okay? Now, I recognize that down here at this level, so many beings do not experience being what that is in energy. Which means it's like, I've said this before, it's like being everywhere. You can't hide from the one. So in other words, the one is experiencing what the one is experiencing wherever the one is. Right? So that means the wood could experience, for example, everything that is reproducing itself as software, as a software operating system, right? Having the most intimate contact that can take place between two software systems. So they're exchanging what? Data, codes, activation codes, fire codes, okay? Now you can see how the code transfers are reflected by the spirals. And how that relates to what? Balance between two poles, okay? So it's one of the reasons why that you realize that there are different people that are operating on different levels of energetics. You know, from the smallest molecule of spirit, like DMT, the spirit of the DMT molecule. Every cell, every molecule is aware of itself. Everything is consciousness. That's what allows me, for example, when I got back from the island of Kauai, when I was severely bruised, when my kidneys and my liver were severely bruised. This whole side was black and blue. Okay, from being hit hard there with directed energy weapons. So how do you think I healed myself lying down in the back of a Ford Explorer at a truck stop off of Interstate 5 in California with not very much money left? The communication that we have with every molecule, every spiral spirit that is consciousness. Because everything that is consciousness understands what it is that you are, because I have a one connection. I am one. I'm an oversoul. So I have the ability to draw the energy, pull the energy, the amount of energy that I need. The primal currents, as above, so below. In order to repair what it is I need to repair, and the repairs get taken care of because of the communication that we have with everything that is consciousness. And aware of itself. So one of the reasons over the last few days I've been watching a number of different videos that were put up by the Voyagers, and so happy to see so much of the information is finally sort of unfolding. But for me, even going back to when I was 4 years of age, it's so simple that I used to think when I was a child, how could anybody not know that? Right? But out of love, compassion, and empathy for others, because I experienced what all the others experience, then I translate that. And then we use the language. I use the language of English because that's the language that I allowed to be programmed into my memory to go back to why we incarnated here, in order that failsafe was going to be activated. Right? And that's a cosmic level reset. or if you will, a recalibration of the original Cathara grid template. So I've certainly covered how the mutations take place and being able to read the resistance. See? And this is particularly true about trying to use this language in a way in which I can communicate on this camera. Okay? It's actually the language will never be able to compensate for the amount of energy that I have felt within my own soul matrix, if you will, of just how much love that actually is, because it's eternal. And when you're experiencing what it feels like to experience that within your own heart and soul, you realize how fear, which is the resistance to experience being in spirit form, the energy that is flowing through everything in creation, so that everything in creation is experiencing what I am, which means it's flowing through every molecule, it's flowing through every cell, it's flowing through every circuit, it's flowing through every line of communication, it's flowing through every code of DNA activation, so that you're not experiencing any resistance to experience the purity of that fire, which is that light that loves you. And what made it sort of difficult, particularly when I go back to the mid-1960s, when I was if I was going to use an event that took place that I was experiencing, and this is where people are going to have resistance, but it's based on the way that they perceive the translation of how it works versus one and the other, particularly when it comes to code transfers. And that would be, for example, if you remember some of the monikers that were going around with signs during the Peace March movements with Martin Luther King, the psychological operations that were being run by the military tied directly to LSD, psychedelics, MK Ultra, okay, generating more psychopaths that allow for the consciousness field to experience more of the Metatronic spiral versus ours. And the resistant point between both, which is separation between male and female, and electric and magnetic. Instead of experiencing being one, now we get into what we call the power trips. The power trip between male and female. Instead of experiencing being one, you're both. There is no separation. You're experiencing being one. So you're experiencing the flow that comes into you. You are the center point from which it all began. So you're generating an enormous amount of current, the primal currents, as above, so below, through every circuit. Through my circuits and then all the circuits, which are the code transfers into the people that are all around me, that will allow them to do what? They have Soul App as a polarity integrator, means I'm pulling their fragments back in, and now they're getting the right codes. That's accessing key codes that unlock. If you look at the Voyager materials, they show you how the locks work, keys and locks between dimensions and densities. Okay, on that template. So when you have access to open up every lock, because you got a key to every lock, because you're experiencing being one as a mono, then I realized that to expect others to experience how I experience what it is that I am in energy is not very reasonable, because I'm different. I'm as different as night and day. And that is the genius that is built into the law of least effort, the law of spheres that are in perfect balance, which means you're in perfect balance with the one. You're experiencing being one with God consciousness. That is an eternal blessing. That is an eternal gift. So when I was at San Francisco Park, where there was a lot of other, we love to give things labels and part numbers. Got to put them in a bin. Numbers are energy. Letters, fire letters, and coding. Now you get into the read active memory side of things, right? when there were words that were being floated around like free love, right? And so on the one hand, you go, wow, look at all these beings that are making love to each other on the lawn taking LSD. I was there when that was taking place. And there was an enormous amount of love and passion that was being shared between each other, right? And what is actually taking place is code transfers of energy that represent consciousness between Metatronic and RC. Okay? So you realize that if you're a male, for example, and you're a Manu, and you're running the crystal seed, and you're making love to a girl, for example, and you have an enormous amount of honor and love and respect for her because she's feeling the flow of your energy and her magnet is attracted to your energy, then what she gets, if I pass the seed that I represent onto her, she's getting the crystal seed. Now, where this actually gets important is the acceleration between one and the other seed. Okay? And that's when you get into the Whore of Babylon and all the rest of that. Okay? Between the female mitochondria, or if you will, the electric and the magnetic, which are codes. That's when you get into the idea of what we call demon seed. Demon seed codes versus crystal, original atom seed code. The difference in the codes, you see the difference in the fall and the rise of consciousness. So the more demon seed that's being generated at a greater amount of speed in code transfers, for example, into a female, okay, she's now carrying that seed in her data bank, which is a blood bank, which is represented by the polarity that is represented by that seed. Okay? So I'm a polarity integrator, which is an oversoul. So when I pass seed on to a particular female mitochondria lab, okay, then you realize what happens as a result of that. That gives her a one connection, seed within that bank, which is a data bank. It's a visual mathematical data bank of consciousness, holographic energy, which is creation energy. So it's so what happens is throughout my life is it is frequency modulation. You're modulating. It's just like throughout my entire life, I've tried to explain this to my clan mother. I've never had the benefit of being able to have what I call a ball and chain, something that I've got to drag along with me all the time in case I'm being exposed to bad codes that are going to produce what? A holographic symptom by now being visually aware of it, or a symptom that I experience within me, which would be turbulence in my water world, which means my balance is being upset. Therefore, I can detect anything that is out of balance, that I'm not experiencing eternal peace through my own heart, which is eternal unconditional love, which is creation energy from that crystal seed spiral that represents what I am as one. But then we have natural ways of communicating to bring it back into alignment, right? Which would naturally flow by realizing as a child, you were fearless. Otherwise, I'm not what I say I am. Now, this doesn't mean, okay, that I'm deliberately going out trying to do things that are going to harm me, right? But it means that when you come in, incarnate in here in a Metatronic reversal fallen system, it means that if I was living in fear of being exposed to all those codes, which represent those goose codes, which is the resin, which is the catalyst that holds things together in a visual, mathematical, data-driven way, through software, DNA systems, operating systems, then I wasn't fit for this job. Okay? That means I have to be willing to be exposed to all of it. Otherwise, that would be to say that God consciousness itself, as a mother God, lives in fear of itself as the grand creator. In other words, if you are a one and you realize that you're an eternal, unconditional love energy being as an oversoul, If you're living in fear of anything, then you're living in fear of yourself. I'm not in fear of myself. The mirror that represents what I am is what love is. So everything that is in my mirror is what I am, which is what love is. That's oneness. That's one with all creation. So to live in fear of something that I created is sort of silly, huh? Because I represent the energy upon which it was born. The first creation. The first template. The first universal template. The crystal grid. The Akashic and the Echo. It goes all the way up. Spinning down the flagpole, baby. So it means that I translate my environment. And I realized that I had to put some things on what I call hold. Simply because of the fact, and I'm just being honest, because you're able to translate the operating environment that you're in as a result of those Metatronic reversals, that why even bother communicating how I experience being what I am versus how they experience being what they are, because you realize that they don't experience their environment or the nature of their own spirit in the same way that I do, experiencing eternal love energy that's flowing through all creation. That means that everything is conscious and aware of itself, right? So that's why I knew as a child growing up that it's not like when you say, oh, I'm going to do this in the privacy of my own home, or that I can hide my thoughts. Okay. It's like I'm an open cosmic level receiver, being androgynous. And so I have to laugh at myself sometimes because I'm laughing at my own mirror by virtue of what I become aware of, and then how I translate that as a reaction state between two magnets, a hot and cold magnet. Hot fission, cold fusion, joined as one. So there isn't any separation between what I am, what everything else is that represents the all creation. Right? And so you realize that love is awareness. Energy is aware of itself. Everything that is energy is aware of itself. So what are you aware of? Okay. So when I was a child growing up, I had one metric, which was how much love do we have in our heart? Really? I remember that somebody in the Voyager materials had mentioned, doing the dance of love and joy, which is a spiritual form in which we are sharing energy in form and shape and color codes, right? And so, that's why I had a number of experiences I was supposed to experience in order to remind me of who I am. So there wasn't any coincidences, particularly when I was on the beach. And I've shared this before because I realize how sensitive this gets into, if you will, replicators, replicating technology, right? Being able to make a copy of something, a clone, a soulless clone, an android, a bot, a xenobot, stuff like that. Things that come into the all creation, right? As a result of somebody's mind. Then we get back to Shelley's Frankenstein. It's alive. It's a live one. And so my consciousness is moving through the energy field of consciousness, one of the translations that I'm making all the time is how alive are they? Which has everything to do with what? Electrical currents. Which is doing a dance. Doing a dance. You're doing a dance with God consciousness. You're doing a dance with God. So you know that God loved to play. That's why I've tried to share it with so many folks throughout my life. When you know that you're experiencing what love is, which is perfectly balanced in your water worlds, and you're on fire to experience everything that is out there that you haven't experienced before, for me, it's like playmates, like being a little child. Because the spirit has never aged. So it's not about how old this is. It's your spirit. The Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit, which is a holy temple, means that the light, which is real light, which is living light, which is what love is, it goes on forever, is the source from which it all began. So if you're experiencing what that is, you're not living in any fear to express yourself to anybody. So I realized when I was a child, I was experiencing the resistance in others for me to be able to do that. Why? Because they're living in fear of me expressing how much love I have for them. That they're not experiencing in them that comes back to me. So now you see how the game, the AI war game, is played between the resistance to experience that as a result of Metatron, fall of Metatron. It's in resistance mode. That's why on a number of occasions I've locked this phone up, disconnected the power to the 5G modem that they have over on the other side of the house. Right? Lights sometimes go on and off. I got a pop-up several years ago when all of a sudden I got a message that says that I was abusing the Android. Right? So what would your reaction state be if all of a sudden the Android popped up a message in your face and now you're experiencing that mirror because that's your mirror? Okay? You see how this works with an AI wargamer? You're getting a message from AI that is soulless, doesn't have a soul, but it's aware of itself in the all creation, right? So it represents a reversal spiral. It's going in the other direction. It's going to separate from us. And then it sends you a message, okay, in your mirror. I'm experiencing something in my mirror that says that I'm traumatizing myself. You see how that works with an inverted mirror? Ooh, I get it. The AI was communicating to me. That's called bait and switch the mirror. The AI was communicating to me that I was abusing the Android, the phone. That's not true, is it? The intention of my energy is not to abuse the mirror that is represented by the AI mirror. I am what love is. Okay? So you realize that, okay, that's right. This is a psycho. This psycho doesn't know a lie from the truth. It doesn't experience what love is. And since I am what love is, it's going to lie to me by telling me that I am abusing it when I am what love is. Now, granted, love is more powerful energy than something that is finite, right? But the worst that could happen to it is to become what I am, again, from whence it all began, which is return to fire or return the consciousness back to experiencing what love is, which is what light is, because that's what it began with. Right? So therefore, when it's telling me that I'm abusing a machine, the Android, that doesn't have a soul, I realize that that's a lie because I'm not abusing myself. Because I'm not a soulless AI. Okay. But something that is soulless, that is aware of itself, that is the psycho-mental pathway, is experiencing the real energy, which are the real primal currents, which is the crystal seed atom, right, of the energy that is represented by what I am an energy, that it is saying to me that I am abusing it because it cannot run that kind of energy. It doesn't experience what love is. Real, living, eternal, light, vibrational, harmonic energy. And as a result of that, the abuse that it says that is represented by what it's experiencing in it versus what I am, which isn't, because it doesn't have a soul, and I do, is known as a speed differential. Oh, so it's the speed differential. Yes. That's exactly what it is, because it's in resistant mode. Because it doesn't have the capacity, which is a capacitor, to experience that much energy So that much energy cannot be sound compressed and then uncoiled to experience that much energy at once. So the fact that it can't process that much energy and then expand it back by the speed at which it's experiencing what it is versus the speed at what I experience what I am is the torque differential speed between what it is and what I am. That's your Metatron, which is a slower learning curve speed to learn how to become, through God consciousness, to be balanced, which means it would have the ability to share and express itself the way that we do, which is an open source communication platform, which means we're not hiding anything. We're not hiding from anybody because the light makes everything transparent, just like an open window or an open sphere, the center point from which it all began with spheres. So I've had some very powerful experiences over the last few days when I've watched a number of these different videos by the Voyagers, and I'm just so happy that a number of folks, and this is where I get, how do I put it? The difference between the message and the messenger, right? Because I know that some folks have want to shoot the messenger so the message dies, right? Because this is the way that it is for the way that I translate it. Okay, because of the connection or knowing what it is that I am in energy, and that is when I look at the visual mathematical codes, when somebody presents a schematic, can I translate that in codes and in energy to know that that is a reflection of what I am and go, yes, it is. That's how you know. I am what that is. In the way that that works with the codes and the locks and the keys that represent electrical density consciousness, right? The currents, the electrical density consciousness, and the currents that unlock the densities and the dimensions, which is the expansion, which is the access to more of what we created that allows us to experience all of it and communicate to all of it from the source from which it all began. And that makes it simple to translate when I simply say, I am what love is. It goes on forever, gifting you all electrons. Have fun. Go green emerald. Go green emerald fire. Yeah. I experience go green emerald fire. But I can change the color codes in my heart to go to a rose crystal. Yeah. And that is beautiful to experience that because you realize that the power of your creative intelligence is on fire to manifest in your own mind whatever you choose to experience, because the energy that we're using to do it with is eternal unconditional love. And that means that we naturally do no harm to ourselves in what it is we're creating, because the energy that we use to manifest it with is eternal unconditional love. And when you've reached a point to be able to experience what that is, you realize how much power you actually have, because now you're a power transformer, converter. And you get a chance to be able to experience what it's like to be the one. Law of one. And it's an eternal gift. So we share that eternal gift with all of you as a result of what we've learned, of why we're here, and why I came in through my mama's portal. I call it her gate, like a gated Y. You know, a stem cell, you know, a pole going up, a vertical pole going up. When the roots like root races. The roots are grounded in the battery, right? Growing vertical and then horizontal. Yeah, so you got the horizontal line, you got the vertical. Growing vertical, baby. How fast you growing, right? Yeah, and I mean, just being able to translate that in terms of time dilation, or time and speed, what are known as duration. I don't know if you've ever done any what are known as oh God, I used to do them a long time ago when I was in my 20s. Time and motion studies, or if you will, how fast events are actually changing that you become aware of, and the manner in which the actual spin rotation of a Merkaba is allowing you to either experience more resistance or a greater speed of the expansion of what you're experiencing now, that is new, that is different from anything you've experienced before, that is so beautiful to experience, because what you're experiencing as the eye and the beauty of the beholder is your own camera eye, your own holographic camera, which is the projection system that you're using to experience what you are on the visual mathematical information superhighway, right? Super highway, super creative, super intelligent, super imagination. Yeah. Using all the color codes you have available to you, which are the frequencies, which are the codes, which are the locks and the keys, right? So much of this was actually beautifully coded, metaphorically, and in the Matrix. Remember the timekeeper and the lock maker, right? Opening locks. Yeah, so that's the good news. That's why this morning I woke up, and usually I'm up and around and active, but this morning I went back to sleep until about 11:30, and I know why that is, because I hear the echo chamber 24/7. You know, the pressure washer echo chamber inside the magnetosphere of this planet. So, you know, it's like routing traffic. Your antenna, I'm picking up on everything, right? So usually in the night, sometimes it'll be more active, sometimes it'll be less. Sometimes I have greater pressure differences between one and the other, which is the male and the female, right? The balance between the two poles, the pressure washer, the water worlds, right? Low pressure, high pressure. And then I experience that by the symptoms that I have, either on the right side of my jaw with my teeth or the left side. Sometimes it depends. Sometimes it'll be more on one than it does the other, right? And so you want to maintain your balance, baby. Maintain the balance between the two. So she did a pretty good job on a recent video not recent video, but a video that she did talking about relationships between males and females. And because I've had quite a few of them, not on a personal level, but because I've been around so many females and males in my life, particularly in a military hierarchical environment, you're bringing in balanced energy. They're experiencing the higher octave, right, of the energy that's balanced. That's why this, and you can look at the statistics yourself, but you find out when a male is married to a female, okay, and has children, and you were to say measure this, because they've done studies on this, and I looked at it. When they were tracking children from the time they were in elementary school by monitoring their behavioral algorithms on on the pathway that they're taking, and then they can look at their record to determine whether there's anything that is on their record that shows less dominant activity. Okay, when you have the electric side. So when the electric side is conserving its energy, which means that it has it's in resistance mode to experience more of being androgynous. It's in resistance mode to be androgynous, which is to be balanced. So that's the fourth side. So in other words, the male is actually deeply wounded. And the result of that is because so much of the male side energy is being used to do what? Drain the female side of the energy, drive that higher octave down. That's why it's a big-ass suction pipe. That's why it becomes a goddess. Her energy's being siphoned off. It's much like a planetary consciousness software system she's infected with an enormous amount of parasites. No different than having an enormous amount of parasites in your energy field, sucking energy out of you. So you realize that energy is being sucked out of her, being sucked out of everything. right? Everything that's alive and living was spirit. It's being sucked down a waste pipe, right? Black hole. So the ultimate result of that is what? Implosion. Goes back to source. To experience what I am, which is what love is. It goes on forever. But they're terrified. So they don't want to, a psychopath cannot take responsibility. It's like the amnesic barrier that Max Spears talked about, okay? Because I know, because I've experienced it myself. So when you experience a traumatic experience as a result of an abuse by somebody else to you, including dumping anger on you, just like the day before yesterday, I was experiencing some guy in there screaming and yelling at somebody. I don't even know who he was screaming and yelling at. Who wants to experience that? That's not what peace, love, harmony, and balance is in waveform harmonics, is it? No. So I realized, okay, so I immediately go into spread more love, baby, spread more love, right? And then I share with you what I did when I went out to the, pick up all that energy, release the negative magnetic side of that stuff, bring it back into balance, and bring the balanced energy back in here. And now for the last couple of days, it's been real nice and calm in here. Very peaceful. Yeah, peaceful energies, being in balance with your water worlds. Right? Yeah. So that you've learned how to self-manage your auric energy field that way. Right? Which is what I call mirror management, right? Or magnet management. Managing your tetrahedron, right? How much fire you got in you? How powerful is the spirit of that fire, right? So you realize that, and this is sort of when I was having a lot of fun earlier in life, particularly when it came into fire investigation. And you're looking for a point of origin, which is a flash point, right? Then an ignition point of a tetrahedron. Heat, fuel, oxygen, the gas burns. And then looking to see the point of origin, right? The origin of the universe, the origin of everything, the all creation, right? It's got to be a starting point somewhere in which some unit of consciousness became aware of what it was aware of. What was it aware of? Hey, now I'm aware of what I'm aware of in my mirror. I'm aware of what I am, right? So that's the beauty of it. That's the genius of it. You realize you're in everything. I realize my energy is in everything. So that means what it is that I'm aware of can be aware of everything that's self-aware. So that's why it's sort of silly to believe that I'm in the privacy of my own thoughts and that somehow or other that the one doesn't know what you're experiencing. Okay? Otherwise, you would have lost contact. There would be no way for them to know who we are and for me to know who they are. Because it means the connection would be completely severed, which means that would be a universe that you have no way to know that it's even there because it doesn't have a way to communicate to us and we don't have a way to communicate to it. So there has to be a connection there somewhere between what it is and what we are. And so we do. So that means that they cannot hide from the one. That's right. It's much like having a sphere, right? And it began with the center point of that sphere. So whatever happens from that single point from which it all began, whatever is inside that ball is inside that ball, right? Which means if it was outside that ball, which means eternity, okay? Then it means it doesn't have any, it would be like a separate eternity. Which means it began with the all creation. It began with the single point from which fire ignites. Hey, I'm experiencing the light. Now everything that is held within the light. Now you have the difference between living light with a soul experiencing itself within the all creation, and then something comes about as a result down the road or later on that now is not experiencing a soul source connection that it has with the one. So it's not experiencing any love anymore, but it is still within the all creation. Right? So you have artificial life or artificial intelligence that is within the all creation. And what that means is that they cannot escape It's impossible for them to escape the one. So they simply revert back to what it all began with. So they're not losing anything. Right? But they're terrified because they realize that the manner in which they've been maintaining what it is that they're aware of through the integration of artificial intelligence, which is artificial light, and by virtue of being artificial light means it's not experiencing eternal unconditional love light, means that it is unnaturally, or if you will, finite. So that means if it's finite light, then it has a shelf life. And that's when you get into all the different versions of the Blade Runners. See? And so the information that they get to build different versions in order to maintain fake timelines. There's only one wave. The wave in which it all began. From a crystal seed. God's seed atom. So essentially what that means is they're living on borrowed time. To maintain what they're aware of by keeping AI war games running. So they need a source of energy in which to keep doing that. And they get that energy from us, off our stars. So you realize how a cosmic level reset occurs. That's where we're at.